good evening, and welcome to our very first PyLadies Dublin event of 2022, and a happy new year to everyone. And thank you to our guest speakers as well, and my co-host Lay. And I think I will have Mick joining us on YouTube live chat, helping us monitor any questions people might have for our speakers later. So, of course, I'm going to start off with some announcements. But before, just want to, for people who don't know about PyLadies Dublin, here is the team. My co-host Lay, who you'll meet later, and Mick, who normally runs up and down the stairs whenever anything goes wrong at my end, and shouting at me, think people can't hear you and things like that. But you can see all our Twitter handles there, and if you want to get in contact with us and PyLadies, those are our details. And a special announcement for this year, we have a partnership and collaborating with Women in AI Ireland with their mentoring program called WAI Practice. And it's a 2-month program, and we will be doing a call for mentors at the beginning next month. So a mentor will be looking after about 3 or 4 people in their areas of expertise, and after a couple of months, we aim to have an in-person event for both both groups, and in May. And fingers crossed, we get to see everyone in person and check out the showcase of all the projects over coming out of Y Practice. So keep an eye on it. I'll be doing announcements and shouting out about it on Facebook, on Twitter. I think we're on LinkedIn as well. But yeah, I will send more information to everyone anyway and keep you all posted. Yes, our friends at Python Ireland, they have a speaker coaching session, and this month, and it's a chance for you to improve your I suppose your presentation skills. They've hired a professional trainer, and they're hoping that people that go through this workshop will give talks at their monthly meetups and even PyCon Ireland. And of course, we welcome speakers to PyLadies Dublin as well. So don't worry, these slides will be posted up after the event as well. And I'll try and post up some of the links on chat if I get a chance. So next one is the Women Developer Academy. They asked me to pass this information along. The applications are open for you to apply if you're interested. There's also a Medium write-up as well. And both those links, again, I will share the slides so you can access the links and register if you're interested and read more about it. And of course, the next upcoming Python events is Python Ireland. They run their events on the second Wednesday of each month. Head over to python.ie to check out for more information. I think it'll redirect you to their meetup page where you can RSVP, and their RSVP normally opens on the week off, I think, of their meetup, and they'll have information around nearer to their meetup event. And of course, our next PyLadies Dublin will be in February 15th. It's on the third Tuesday of each month, and we are looking for speakers. So if you like to talk or demo or want to give a workshop, drop us an email, and we can see how we can collaborate and how you can get involved. And of course, here are the list of some of the various diversity events. So most of them are up in Northern Ireland and Belfast, but one of the big ones is the Women Tech Makers launch, which is happening tomorrow evening. There's a little highlighted link at the bottom. That's where I curate a lot of the events, especially the diversity and tech events in and around Ireland. So if there's anything missing or you want to add to it, just let me know and I'll add that to the list. And this just came up just today. the Techstar kind of Women Dublin online event. It's happening in March. So if you're interested in that and curious about it, there's a link to it to find out more information. And of course, oh yes, and the Organiser Developer Week has asked me to pass this information along about their conference. The Eventbrite link there will actually allow the community to get some free tickets. If the tickets are all gone, then there's a discount as well on the pro ticket. So that's Developer Week 2022, and of course Outreachy as well. Their application for mentors is open, and the internship I think is open beginning of February, and it's for their May program. So if you have an open source program or open source project, and you want to mentor some interns, this would be a chance for you to introduce people, especially people from diverse backgrounds, and then contribute to open source. So this evening, this is kind of the agenda. So I'm going through. So this was the announcement part, and then we will have Mo and Aoife talk about pair programming, followed by Laysa talking about the fun of iterations. After, and of course, as we have a bit of time, I think both speakers, if you want to go over a little bit, that is okay. Or if anyone wants to do an impromptu lightning talk, you're welcome as well to jump in and let us know, and I'll invite you into the Zoom call. Yeah, so I suppose this needs to be done. Remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel for all those watching us on YouTube, and don't forget to hit that notification button so you know when our next video is coming out. But without I will next our speakers, Aoife and Mo will come on in a sec. I will put on an intermission screen, and while we get set up, and I hope you enjoy the upcoming talk. So give me a sec. I'll be right back.
Hi everyone. Today we're here to talk about pair programming and how it has helped us to solve problems on our team in Phorest. We gave a similar talk last year in person at a conference in Rome, and we asked the audience who has tried pair programming before, and obviously lots of hands were raised. We followed up with the question of who actually enjoys pair programming. Less hands, but actually still a lot more than we initially expected, based on our previous experience and questions in interviews or conducting pair programming interviews. Was never really something that we got the sense that everyone loved doing. Either way, what we hope to do then and what we hope to do now today is to provide new ideas for those that enjoy it, change the minds of those that don't, and inspire those who've never tried it before.
So before we completely dive in, I'd like to tell you a bit more about who we are. So I am Mo, and this is Aoife, and we are engineers at Phorest Salon Software. Currently, we are on the marketing team. So our primary goal is to provide the best possible software and marketing suite to salons. We allow them to market themselves via SMS and email. We want them to be able to manage their reviews and connect with their clients. And that's just to name a few features. We have a really solid team, and we're consistently working every single day to deploy and ship out great products to our clients. But even with that, we still have our fair share of problems.
And so to delve deeper and to highlight some of those problems, a couple of months ago, our team had just completed a doozy of a project with a delivery date that had more than tripled from the original estimation due to unforeseen complexities and communication issues with a third party. During this time, the team really became deflated, and in some circumstances, team members just started reporting feeling like isolated. This is obviously heightened due to the fact of the lockdown, the pandemic, and I know many teams have been experiencing these issues. As we were moving on to a new project, we wanted to try and experiment with ideas of reducing these feelings of isolation, and by communicating more frequently, hopefully to get on top of complexities as early on as possible, and if not, to at least to share those problems together. Alongside this, the issue of isolation, I was still relatively new to the team, to Phorest in general, and Mo was still relatively new in her development career. We were looking for opportunities to work closely together and to integrate into the team and learn more about the product and the technologies that we were using. As we were planning for our next feature as well, we also realized that there was going to be a ton of overlap. And if we had decided to work independently like we had before, we would just be tripping over each other. And therefore, pair programming just made sense for us as an idea to start with to help us to avoid these problems.
So as Aoife had said, we decided that pairing would be the first approach to solving some of the issues that were arising on the team. Before we started pairing, we had reached out to some of our colleagues who we felt were veterans at the practice, and we had done a good bit of pairing ourselves. So what we did was we created a bit of a framework for ourselves that we could iterate from to start. So what we did initially was we had a 40-minute time session, which we would have focused uninterrupted work happening during that time. And then when that was over, we would have 10-minute breaks. And then we always kind of joked that we'd actually have more breaks when we were pairing than we were not, but it was needed to just refresh, hit the reset button, and then after that break was over, get back into pairing. Another thing that we implemented was switching between a driver and a passenger. And essentially what that means is the driver is the person who codes, and the passenger is the person who is assisting the person who's coding. The driver and passenger approach created a balanced dynamic between Aoife and I when we were pairing. That's because it allowed both of us to code. It also allowed both of us to take a step back and see the bigger picture. And it gave us an opportunity to each teach and learn from each other. But most importantly, what we found extremely valuable was that we got to know each other really well during this time. So the first few minutes of every session, we'd have a bit of a chin wag. And it was awesome because it strengthened our relationship and really built the rapport. And then in the end, we found that we were communicating really well when we were solving complex problems and just able to work a lot faster. And then after these times of having a nice chat, it was the natural progression into having a more technical conversation about the problem that we were trying to tackle within that 40-minute session. And the goal there was really to break down that problem into bite-sized chunks and break it down into little pieces.
Yeah, so of course with any approach, any experiment, there's always going to be pros and cons. For us though, we found the pros far outweighed the cons. But if we were to take it from each other's perspective, so for me, at the time, I was a senior engineer and a new manager as well. And as I was stepping into this role, and particularly starting on a new team remotely, I was finding it difficult to find my stride with sharing knowledge remotely. Previously, like a lot of people before going into lockdown and working remotely, my style of teaching was that impromptu, swivel the chair around, start chatting to someone and working close side by side. But that was obviously a style I had to adjust. It was also obvious that while I was finding it difficult for sharing the knowledge, I found that my junior engineers were not as forthcoming with asking for help or asking for advice. And while it's admirable for junior developers to obviously go investigate, dig into problems, start debugging, finding their way, that's to a degree and to a reasonable time box. But what I was finding is those time boxes weren't reasonable. What was happening is they were getting frustrated at themselves. The team was getting frustrated. It was costly in terms of project and delivery time management. But with pair programming, these opportunities to teach off the cuff just came so much more natural to us. If we were digging into a piece of code, it was much easier for a question to rise, and I could delve a bit deeper into the standards, practices, and just the kind of regular day-to-day teachings that arose in our sessions. With this, I also found that Mo has become much more forthcoming with the questions. As she mentioned, that building of our rapport, our relationship has strengthened so much more. And since then, she's obviously coming with a lot more questions more frequently and outside of our pairing sessions. And for me, it's just a total win. The definite drawback for me as a manager was, as my responsibilities in the team began to increase, that obviously was an increase in context switching, and context switching and pair programming just don't go hand in hand. And when I found that level increasing, I found our pair programming sessions would get shorter, or I would have to cut them off. And that again, obviously is not how they're meant to be run. However, we adjust, but the main win for me was another member of our team had volunteered to say, like, I'm interested in getting involved in that side of things, but I need help. I need someone to teach me. I need someone to get me set up on my local development environment. And now that Mo was comfortable in doing these pair programming sessions, she volunteered then to help and get this person set up, get their local development set up, and then through pair programming took a feature from acceptance criteria all the way to release to production. And for me as a manager, that's a total win that I can confidently then step back and look to solve other problems.
So kind of in the inverse, but similar to what Aoife has said, as a junior developer, pairing has given me a safe space to observe, ask stupid questions, and to rubber duck as much as I possibly can, even though, of course, there's no stupid questions out there, but sometimes it feels that way. And it has been a vital experience for me to learn and understand the technical material that I've come up against, which is awesome. And one of the reasons for that is because it's really reflected my learning style. So initially, I find that it's important that someone teaches me something. So whether that means that I read a blog post or watch a YouTube video, or someone actually takes the time to teach me how to do something. And then from there, I need to practice a lot. And then I can see that I'm starting to get the swing of things. So when we were pairing together and we were using the driver and passenger method, it gave me the opportunity to watch and see how Aoife implemented certain things and her different approach on solving problems. And then when it was my turn to code, then I was able to go and reflect that and do something similar to what she did. And then I found that through this process, my skills have rapidly increased, and I've been so much more comfortable in really understanding the how behind the why, or maybe reverse the why behind the how. Either way. And inevitably, I have so much more confidence in asking questions, first and foremost, in writing code and how I write code, and then reviewing pull requests, which at times could be quite intimidating. And I think that the most important thing is that after all this, I have an amazing mentor like Aoife to look up to.
It's so lovely to hear. Never gets old. But no, and to reiterate on that point, an important outcome from this experiment was just the opportunity for female empowerment in engineering. Supporting women is essential for boosting diversity in the industry and the opportunities to teach and build confidence in each other should be grasped at every chance. We're lucky that Phorest has quite an equal gender balance across the product and development team, and values the time taken to nurture and to grow our engineers. And I know with myself and Mo, we have such a strong rapport that we can just now take that. I trust in her, she trusts me, we can work so smoothly together. And now when we hire in new developers, new starters, new junior developers joining our team, we're in such a strong position to take this approach and take this strategy for upskilling our developers.
So as we finish up, as we continue on to this journey, pair programming is something that we are going to continuously take with us. And we have committed to pairing at least once a week. And again, like I said, this is quite iterative. So even if it's not necessarily planned, it might be impromptu, it might not be 40 minutes, but this is a commitment that we have. And of course, as engineers, we're always looking for ways to improve. So some things that we have tried and want to try some more is using VS Code live share. So essentially, instead of committing code and pushing it up to GitHub and that kind of thing, and then switching, we can just, while we're on the same screen, both edit the code live. So that's pretty cool. And then we also want to start implementing test-driven development. This was a limitation and some complexity within a project that we were working on before. But now as we move into a new project, we hope to start writing the tests and then write code to make the test pass as we move forward in the future. So as well, if you have pair programmed before and have any advice or learnings that you want to share with us, we're really open to hearing your feedback. So yeah, to wrap it up, we love pair programming. And if any of these problems seem familiar to you, all we have to say is try it. Yeah, and if you have questions, let us know in the chat.
Thank you so much.
So thank you again for both your talk on pair programming. So what I'll do is I'm gonna put some intermission video on while we have our next speaker set up. So we'll be right back. See you in a bit.
Hello, everyone. Happy 2022. We are still in January. So I'll be talking today about Iterate is fun next. And it's in the PyLadies Dublin Meetup. For this presentation, I put this Jupyter notebook in my Git repository, and I'll provide a link later on. a little bit about me. My name is Laysa Uchoa. Here's my Twitter account. I'm developer advocate at Aoife, and I have been working with Python for about 4 years now. I'm actually located in Munich. That's why I put a pretzel there. And just some personal stuff. I really like dystopian books. I love tea and I'm a big fan of Carnival. So, what are iterables and what are iterators and all these terms that comes in Python? So these terms are quite similar, and because of the name iterable and iterator, they are very similar, but we go over of what each of these are. So iterables is a Python protocol that describes all objects that can be traversed. So if you think about lists, dictionaries, tuples, strings, range, for example, you can always go in a loop and find elements in this, like you can loop over the elements in a list, for example, or in a dictionary, and they all make it to be an iterable. But talking about the code itself, what does it make this to be an iterable? What is the protocol behind it? So here I have an example. If we have a list composed of 3 elements, let's be basic, and we want to inspect what is inside this list, with Python, you have this function called dir, and you can see whatever is inside the list. So I'll just run it here and we see. So if you're familiar with lists, you will know that a list has a pop, a remove, a reverse, and so on. One thing that we can see here are the dunder methods. And going over the dunder methods, trying to identify what makes a list an iterable, we can find that in a list, you have the iter, which is right here. So this dunder methods makes a list to be iterable. And we will understand what actually this means in the code. So I can loop over the list with a for loop, for example, and so on. And the other method that comes a lot with iterable, iterator is iterator. So iterator is a protocol that allows users to access elements of a sequence one at a time. So it's very similar to the previous one that you can traverse, but in the iterator, you can only access this element one each time, and then you go to the next one and the next one. How do I make an iterable an iterator? So in order to make this, you can use the iter function. As I showed you before, a list, for example, it has the dunder method iter. So you can just call any iterable has a dunder method called iter. So you can always inspect what is in a dictionary or in a tuple and a string. You're going to find those methods there. And you can call iter and you're going to make an iterator. But how does it looks like? So I have a list here, and then I have an iter calling my list, and I will look what is inside there. So the protocol has changed it in this case to become an iterator. Let's run it. One thing that you notice is that we no longer have the add, append, all these methods that we had in a list, for example. We do not have it here, but we have something called next. And this allows us to go to the next element. And we also still have something called iter, which allows us to, actually, it will only return itself. So those are 2 things that an iterator does. A next that goes to the next element, one each time, and the iter that returns itself. So this is basically what you need for an iterator. Talking about protocols and how it's done in the code, it's quite understandable, but sometimes if you want to relate it to real life, and often this is what I do. I'm not sure how you do it, but you can also share it with us. So I try to think, imagine me as an iterator. So the Valentine's Day is very close, it's actually next month. And I try to think about, for example, if I would go to a speed dating, and then I would have to sit in front of a person, talk to this person, and then go to the next one. And I will go over this like in an iterator. And actually, it's often you think like next, when you are kind of this speedy datings. So I made it like this. If I go at here and then I go to the next one, to the next one, to the next one, until what happens until it's over, and stop iteration arises. So we're going to try to understand what happens when you go over an iterator and the elements are done, for example, with the next, and so on. I put here a meme. I hope you enjoy. So let's put names in things or in people. So if you have candidates, so I have here Felix, Marco, Misha, and Paul. And we're gonna make this speed dating as an iterator. So we're gonna get all those candidates and they are in a list, and we're gonna put we're gonna call the dunder method iter on this. So I can basically call it like this. And what I can do it here, I can go over one at each time. So let's see what would be the output. So I think the output is quite small here, but I will just read to you. It's the first one is Felix because he's the first one in the list. Then it comes Marco, and then Misha, and then Paul. Well, if I try to go over it like one more, what do you think will happen? Because I don't have more elements in this list, but I will just run it for you to see what will happen. What happens is that exception is raised. This exception is very particular for iterators. It's called stop iteration. And it's raised every time that you go over what is the number of elements by calling next. So actually, I cannot find the 50 person. So those are the people who I could possibly date in a speed dating. But now thinking more about differentiating these two terms, because iterable and iterator may be still confusing for you, but just for you to understand, an iterable has the dunder method iter, and all iterables have this dunder method iter, and all iterators are iterable, but not all iterables are iterators because they don't have next, for example. And they need to have the dunder method next and the iter to be considered iterators. But just like one thing goes to the other. So if you have an iterable, for example, a list, and you want to become an iterator, what you have to do, it's called the dunder method iter on it. And suddenly you will have access to the next, for example, to the next function. And with the next function, you can go over this list like first element, second element, third element, until a stop iteration is raised. So that is how you can go from an iterable to an iterator and how you can use it with the next. So I think by this time, it should be a bit more clear which one is what. But let's see, for example, what happens in a for loop. So that's quite cool that when you take an iterable, for example, a list, you can just go over like with a for loop and go over this list. But you don't see like exceptions being raised. You don't see this kind of things when you're dealing with this. And the reason you don't see it this way is because behind the scenes, what is actually happened, there is a while true loop, and it's trying to get the next. So for example, first of all, what happens is it takes the iterable, it transforms that in an iterator, and then it uses the next function to go to the next element, to the next element, to the next element, until exception is raised. And you see it here that it breaks. So of course, when we are doing with the for loop, we don't see as exceptions be raised because we kind of get out of the while loop in a clean way. So this would be kind of the equivalent, what is actually being done under the hood, and why you can, in a for loop, you can take any iterable and you can go over it. Because an iterable can become an iterator. And that's how you use it with the while loop, this behind the scenes. So I found this very interesting. I'll just run here for you to see. So you see here the word happy, and as you know, is a string. And in a string, you can go over each character. So I can print here. So actually what's happening, it's probably reaching the exception, and we see it break, but we don't see the exception. But now if we actually try to run with the exception, we would see something like this. Of course, I could as well print something like something, just for you to see what would happen. And ta-da! Something is being printed because it's a while forever. So, I will just stop it here. But let's continue. To sum up, what are iterables and what are iterators and what's the difference? So it's quite simple, because iterables and iterators, they both support for loops. Another thing they both support is the inter method. And with the inter method, it returns itself, so to say, has an iterator. But one thing that differentiates both of them is that iterable, they don't have the next, but iterator, you can always call next, 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 and so on. But sometimes you want to write your own kind of iterators. Why would you like to do this? Because sometimes you want to have functions that are specifics for your iterator, and you want to like customize maybe the message and so on. So it's very common that you do your own iterator for a specific purpose. And I will show you how to do that, or what's considered the minimal in the protocol to have an iterator of your own. So here I have the class myRange, and I have the init. So basically what I want to do here is kind of a counter that goes from a certain number 1, and it will count until the maximum. So we see, like, for example, if the maximum is 3, you'll have 1, 2, 3, and so on. So in order to do that, I have to define, of course, the init method. If you are familiar with object-oriented, is how we started the class in Python. You have the init method. And in this case, I will receive the maximum, so the maximum value that we'll have in this range. We're going to iterate, and we're going to return itself. And we're going to define the method next. In the method next, we're going to check if the maximum has been reached, and if it has been reached, we're going to raise the exception, and if it's not has been reached yet, then we're going to increment. So that's basically these 3 things that we have it here. So we have the iter and the next, and inside the next we have the if else clause to raise the exception in case it goes over. So let's run. So here we have myRange. And here I created just to see what is inside it, if it actually worked, right? So if we have it here, we're going to run. So we see it here. If I check what is like type of, because you can also do this, you can check what is the type of myRange. Let's see. The type of myRange is myRange, of course. But myRange is also from the, it has an iterate, so it can be considered an iterator. Why? Because I can call next and next on that. So if I continue calling, for example, I'll remove this, but if I continue calling next in myRange, we will see that an exception is raised. So the exception is raised. Normally, you don't want to just raise an exception. You actually want to deal that in a nice way, or want to give a nice message. So in this case, I say, hey, this is the end of your iterator, and so on. So that's how you can do a customized kind of iterator. And basically, you need these 2 methods to be there. A iter that returns itself, and the next that should be kind of a limitation of your iteration here. But something is really cool in Python that you don't need to write everything from zero, from scratch. It has something called itertools, which is in the standard library, and you can just import it. You don't need to install it. And for the itertools, it has some functions that are very cool because they make iterators for you, and they make iterators in a nice way. I will go over these 3 of them. First one is count, second one is chain, and the third one is combination. So let's go. In the count, it creates an iterator, an infinite iterator. And this iterator, you just need to give a start point and a step. So it will increment at every step. Of course, here, if you are running your program, you're not going to just use something infinite because you have problems with your memory. So in this case, here in the example, for example, I can try to make a range out of it with the first 5 elements. And it goes from 0 to 2 every time of this. So I just run it here. You see that the result would be 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, because my step is 2. So it will, and the range I'm putting here to limitate. If I have not put a limitation, it will go and go and go and go. And it's not what we really want. I just want to show you that actually you can create infinite iterator. It's quite cool about count. Another one interesting is combinations. Combinations is like, you can imagine you have these 3 friends of yours and you want kind of arrange them in a pair. So to say, for example, in a dinner table or something, and you are interested in all possible combinations of, for example, 2 of them in a table. And combinations are something that always comes up when you're doing probability. But it's always very cool that you can just open your Python terminal and use iter tools to do combinations. But combinations is kind of like, yes. So for example, Jonas can combine with Bell, Jonas can combine with Ale, Bell can combine with Ale, and so on and so forth. If we run this, we can see here that are 3 types of combinations of these 3 elements, every 2 of them combined. Another cool thing is chain. So if you think about chain, it's kind of like 2 things that chain together, right? So chain, what gets, it gets 1 or more iterables and making them into 1. So it's kind of, okay, you can give many, you can give like 3, 4, 5 lists, and we'll combine this and make 1 iterator. So actually, if you notice here, I'm not printing I'm not printing iter tools combination. I have to make a list so you can actually see the result in a nice way. Otherwise, you would see just like the iterator itself. We will not see the print statement. So if you see here for the chain, well, I give it this list 2, 4, 8, 16. And the next one called 32, 64. And what I get in the end is this list here. I'm getting a list because actually I'm transforming in a list. If I didn't transform, I would get an iterator. So this is kind of like the basics. I found iterators and iterables kind of cool. Sometimes you're gonna find this, or sometimes you're gonna see in some problem that actually, hey, actually I can do this in Python, I can do an iterator. And one plus example here that I left for the end, I put some of PyLadies here and the number of people that are in the groups. And we have here PyLadies Dublin, Munich, and Berlin, and I made an iterator out of them. So we have 3 elements, so I'll just run this 3, and you can see it here that I could go by using next in different ways. So I can go like with the dunder method. I can also call the next one like this, or I can call the dunder method. So you can do in this both ways because it's a dunder method. I could also like use iter like dot underline iter like this. And then I would just remove it here. It would have the same result, just for you to know. So I will just run it. And yes, the same output. So actually that's it about iterators and iterables. I just found it very cool and simple to know. And I think you can enjoy, just try out and see that actually this is a nice feature to do, to use it. Thank you for watching.
Cool. I'm gonna thanks again for that. I'm just gonna put an intermission just so I can get everyone back on screen again. Just be right back, everyone, in a few secs. Hi everyone. Thank you again to all our speakers this evening, and I hope everyone has enjoyed the talk. It's great to hear people's experiences, especially from your projects and actually at work, and also having and live coding. I'm always we've somehow appeased the live coding gods. Nothing went wrong because Jupyter Notebook is still really cool. I'm still thinking like maybe I should really done my announcements through Jupyter Notebook at this stage since everyone is using it. Seeing a lot of people there on YouTube. You must have you might be using Jupyter Notebooks as well. So I think it's a rather nifty tool. Has there been any questions? Unfortunately, Lay, we can't hear her, so she'll be using hand gestures, shaking or nodding her head. So, Lay, have you been monitoring see if there's any questions or not from live chat? Probably nope. But yeah, so if anyone, I suppose this a question, the thing I say to everyone, if you have anything and you're too shy to ask on live chat right now, it's okay to drop us an email, and I can send it on to our speakers, and I can follow up, and I'll add it to the slides, or I'll add it to a kind of a post event write up somewhere. I'll probably post it on dev.to. PyLadies have an account on that, so I post the videos as well. So when I do a small little write up, so if you do have any questions and you're too shy to ask here on live chat, and you have something to think and say, oh my god, I should have asked, do drop us an email. I'm sure our speakers are okay.
I think there is one question.
Yeah, is there? Right. What was the question?
So someone say, I'm still confused about when using iter tools makes sense, and when it would be better to just write a for loop.
All right.
What would the advice be?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I see the last one there. Okay. Do you want to take that up and answer it?
Yes, sure. So iter tools, it gives you like different things. For example, I showed it gives you the count, the chain, and combinations. And if you want to do this just with a for loop, yeah, you can do this from scratch, but it would be a lot of trouble. You need to go from the beginning, you need to create your own iterators and so on. So you can take advantage that the standard library gives you this kind of tools. So it's when you should use iter tools. But for simple things like creating a range and go over this or go over a list, you don't actually need to transform the list to an iterator. Because as I said, a list, when you go over a for loop, it's kind of under the hook is actually transforming the iterable in an iterator. So it's you don't need to know that, but it's kind of interesting. But for the iter tools, you can really take advantage. For example, if you want an infinite counter, or if you want, I don't know, combine things, you want to know how many combinations or permutations you can do in certain string or in certain values. So it's how you should be using. But beyond that, there will be cases that you want to customize and make your own iterator with different functions, I don't know, related to your specific case. I have seen like with students, names, and I don't know, agenda, menu, etc. But it comes from when you need it actually. But it's good to know that now you know how to write it. Does it answer your question?
I will share your Jupyter notebooks. I think the best way is also just to get your hands dirty and go in and understand about the issue tools, and so because as I say, it all depends on your circumstance, context, and when you use all these various different tools. So I think I'll share the Jupyter notebook so people can take a copy of it and start playing around with it, and you get a better idea, better sense, because watching someone live code, it can sometimes it can be kind of confusing until you try it out in your own by yourself. But yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, said thank you. But yeah, I as I said, if we don't get to answer kind of questions this evening, feel free to drop us an email, and I'll pass it on to all our speakers. And for sure, there's a question from Patrick for Mo and Aoife. From your experience, do some types of problems lend themselves to pair programming more so than others?
I take that one, Mo, or do you want to take it?
I mean, I guess we can both take it as well. I think that it's based on your approach to solving problems. Because I think that some people may be more suited solving problems with others, and some people may be suited solving problems on their own. So it really just depends. But I think that if you're stuck, especially, as a junior dev, any problem is good for pair programming, because as Aoife said, the sooner that you reach out, the better for support. Even if that pair programming session is 5 minutes, that can help myself or somebody else move forward quicker with a bit of context or a bit of support. So yeah, I don't know. Do you have anything else to add to that one, Aoife?
No, yeah, just more that like no problem is too big or too small or too complex to do with pair programming. As we learned, like as Mo said, is like even finding and learning ways of someone digging into a problem or doing some like debugging practices. While that you might not be intentionally going out of your way to teach that person, it's things that they pick up kind of well in the moment. And you could go into this, and this pair programming session could start, and they ask you a question or and 90% of the time you don't know the answer, so you have to spend some time like, oh, let's have a look in this file, or let's have a play around with this and trial and error some things out. And what we found lately is writing pseudocode is definitely the most important thing for us when we're starting off with a complex problem, particularly with junior developers and a lot of developers really, in saying that just dive straight into the code and then realize while they're in the middle of it, oh my gosh, I've gone too far, let me step back out. If you take 2 minutes, let's write this out in some text and then solve each problem. Sort of like what we want to do with TDD at the end of the day is like, let's just write that most simple test, let's make a pass, and then let's move on to the next thing.
Cool. Thanks. There's another question for you two. While pair programming, how can I inspire my partner to express interesting practice to avoid it becoming a one-sided conversation?
That's a really good question and a really hard one to answer. I think it always depends on the person, but I think what you have to do is make sure it's a safe space for them to suggest things, making sure that they feel comfortable. And that, I think, always comes to lead by example. If you continue to kind of put forward ideas and ask for their feedback on ideas that you're expressed, to show that just because you're suggesting something as a manager or as a leader doesn't mean it's right. And then kind of even set them a goal or something of like to try and come up with one, no matter how small that practice or something they want to trial out. And then you just really champion and say, okay, let's experiment this for an extended period of time. Let's review it and then get other people involved. I think that's the best way. But yeah, it's just making sure it's a comfortable, safe space for them to suggest.
Cool. I think that's all the questions. Does anyone here have anything, kind of a shout out, or before we wrap up, like anything really? It's like this is a so it's kind of say any kind of opportunities, or if there's say PyLadies Munich, you want people to join in when your next event is, and or want people to come and talk at your event, that kind of thing. So feel free to chime in here while we wrap up.
I do have a question or comment about pair programming. How do you normally organize people to make the pair program? Like, I don't know, is there like, okay, like this person's more extroverted, this person's more introverted, and then we're gonna pair them together? Or it does not matter, these personalities? I'm just thinking out loud here.
I like that question. To be honest, with the two of us, it sort of happened organically. We were on the same team, and it kind of came to the point where we decided that was the next move. But there's definitely instances where like personalities work well with others, and maybe that can be trial and error. But I also think that kind of goes back into the previous question that Aoife answered, which is, taking the time to get to know the other person, and to creating a safe space so people can ask questions, or you want to ask questions and to learn and that kind of thing. So for me, I'd say it's always worth pairing with anyone. because there's always something to learn from every single person. And whether or not it's a long-term pairing partnership, that's, you know, that's to come and to grow and that kind of thing. So I don't know, do you have anything to add on that one, Aoife?
Nothing major, just everyone's different. We're quite chatty people, and it came easy, but we know other people aren't as chatty, and so if they just want to go in and dive straight into it, it's okay. But maybe what you can start doing is just throwing in those little bit of conversation to make them be more natural. But particularly for people who are shy and are starting off and might be just not comfortable quite yet, it's reassuring them, maybe talking about mistakes that you've made in the past when they've been trying something, to be like, oh, like kind of empathize and put yourself in their shoes, and that always builds up. And it's just it's the more you do it, the easier it gets. If there is a shy person,
I suppose with everyone working from home, it's even more so, especially if you're in teams. It's not just onboarding someone or any kind of someone new or junior. I think in general, you know, with your peers, because it's been like 2 years. It's quite tough when you're stuck at home and you're not seeing someone in person doing stuff and talking. You know, so I think I think this is a great practice to try and get people more into pair programming if you're working in teams on a project, and get people up to speed, and also as I say, flip sides. You know, have you know, let's say someone might be quite chatty and taking over everything. The whole conversation could be one side. It could be like, okay, it's my turn now. We switch it over. You're quiet, but you get used to them voicing out. Don't be afraid to voice out, you know, the problem. You know, it sounds better than being inside your head as you voice it out and seeing if it's right or not and trying things out. I think that's the silver lining. I'm always looking for the silver lining out of the last 2 years that we're stuck, you know, when people are not working together. And I think this is a kind of a good chance to not just have Zoom meetings, but this is actually being extremely productive and coding when you're pair programming together on projects.
I remember in the physical days, you would share the keyboard and someone would just like, okay, it's my turn. And now I was thinking how it's now, like, no, I will share the screen now. It's my turn.
You take over. Yeah.
But it's quite interesting. I am sure there are also like good things, because sometimes also like who are like more friends, they always get together like naturally, and maybe like in Phorest and per program, you at least give the chance to other people to get to know other people.
Mm-hmm. I suppose it's coming up to like a minute to half now, so I would like to say a huge thanks to Mo, Aoife, and Laysa, and also to Lay, even though you've been silent. But thank you, everyone, and to Mick as well. He's in the background in there in YouTube live chat, helping us monitor stuff and make sure I sound okay. For next month onwards, we are looking for speakers. And then at March as well, we're actually having a meetup in March, which is unusual because as a third Tuesday on a March, we normally land near and around St. Patrick's Day. But this year we're before St. Patrick's Day, I think, and we decided to have an event, and it's also the month where it's International Women's Day month, so we decided to make it special. So I will have to meet up with the organiser of PyLadies London, and we're gonna see if we're gonna do a collaborative event for March. So if you're interested in being part of that, let me know as well. But thank you again. This is like an unofficial collab with PyLadies Munich. So thank you so much for contacting me over PyLadies Slack. So for people who don't know, I'll put that link as well. There is a global PyLadies Slack out there. It's open for anyone to join. Everyone is there in PyLadies world. It's really good fun. All the organisers, all the resources, help. You want to ask for help or anything, it's great. So I will put all that, the slides, the Jupyter Notebook link, anything that Mo and Aoife has, kind of tips about, you know, pair programming, if you have any, I'll put them into the post-event message and the write-up as well. So again, thank you everyone for your time this evening, and thank you to all our speakers. Thank you again for your time, and hopefully we'll see you soon, and we'll Yeah, and again, happy New Year to everyone, and see you next time. Bye bye.
Bye. Good night, everyone.